My name is Nick, and I'm doing a little video here on the leather projects that I've done. Haven't been doing them for very long, a few years. I spend maybe a few hours a week doing it in spare time. So these projects are truly made by an amateur, and I just want to clarify that. One of the reasons why I want to do these series of videos is just to sort of demonstrate what can be expected in terms of achievement if you don't spend a lot of time doing the leather work, but you like to do it for a hobby. Now, I've tried different hobbies. I thought I'd be a good mechanic to do on the side, and I hate grease. It was a terrible idea. I thought woodworking would be a good hobby for me to do, and I hate sawdust. It would get in my eyes and swell up my eyes. It was absolutely terrible. I wouldn't suggest it for anybody that's sensitive to dust or anything of that sort. So I settled on leather as something to do in my spare time for a hobby when I was trying to refocus my mind, if you will. So this here are some of my first projects that I did, as I said, starting out and trying to get my feet wet. When I started out, I bought a bunch of different tools just to have something to work with, and I bought bundles of leather that were basically scrap pieces from upholsterers. I believe they were upholsterers. I'm not really sure, to be honest with you. Then this was a piece that I cut out, and I just wanted to see what the stamping design would look like if I followed the edge and tried to stay true to it and everything else for a barbed wire pattern. I thought, barbed wire, that would be a cool pattern. Truth of the matter is it sucks. Nobody wants it. Everyone looks at it and goes, man, that is some of the hokiest stuff ever. So yeah, didn't go over too well, but it was my first set of stamping tools. So you can see I used it on a lot of stuff in the beginning because that was the only set of stamping tools I did have. Now I did buy some what you might call letter stamps because I wanted to do, logos, names, things of that sort, and to be able to do it well and consistently. So barbed wire with the logo of someone's company, I forget whose. And this was the start of a design. You can see it's a little bit wet where I got it soaked in order to be able to stamp more effectively. And that was basically the start of it. The next step was to sort of form it. Now when I started forming, I basically created a block of wood, and I literally got it soaking wet, and I used my fingers and wood blocks and everything else to try and push the leather around the wood block to shape, because I wanted to create like a little credit card holder. So that's how I formed it. Now I just use vacuum seal. It's a lot easier. There's another image of it. Let me flip it around. There we go. With a little bit of, I actually dyed the edge. I dyed the logo. I did a little bit of finished stamping on the inside using one of these Chinese stamps that I bought. Like I bought a kit of 40 or 50 of cheap stamps of all different sizes, shapes, and designs. It's a cheap way to start, and then you see which ones you like, and you buy really good quality examples of the ones you really like. That's a good way to start. This is a little bit more finished because it's actually, now when I did this, I didn't realize how much Resolene or some kind of acrylic finish will change the color. It literally went from being like a nice light tan to being a dark red. That was almost imperceivable. I mean, when you look at this, it's really hard to see the differentiation in colors. That's one of the problems with using an acrylic finish, and I didn't discover that until I'd done all that work, and hey, guess what? Can't see. Here's another example of it with a little bit better lighting, and I started to put the buttons on it. And this was my second example of a basic same design that I was going to make for someone else. Again, barbed wire pattern and lettering. You can see I didn't do a very good job on the lettering here. Oh, this is my first portrait attempt, where I literally drew the face, and actually tried to stamp the face in with a stamp that does raised leather shapes and all that. Now, if I had to do this over again, I would get it really wet and sort of bubble out the actual suit and hat and everything to give it a little bit more form and definition. This was another early attempt at doing a portrait of you-know-who, Jesus Christ. And I'd still like to revisit this one and do a really good example of it. I'm not particularly fond of this eyebrow right here. I would separate the eyebrow so it doesn't look like a unibrow here and then a separate brow there. So I'd make some changes to it. But yeah, this was doing the same thing with a tool that has like a raised, that allows you to raise the leather edge up. And you use a cutting tool that you attach to your thumb, and you sort of just move along the shape. You can find videos of it on YouTube. I'm just not really good at it. This is This is my first attempt at a book binding. I haven't done one since. A lot of work. I had this new stamp that I had just bought with a little Celtic braid that looks like it's interwoven. And if I'm being honest, I didn't care for it that much as far as the design goes. But this was according to someone's specification. See, originally I wanted to put the face of Jesus Christ on the back, but the person that I was making it for, no, I want a dove. Okay, so I did a dove. And the dove turned out okay, actually. Not too bad. There's the side, so you can see what the side looked like. Bookbinding actually was kind of fun. I enjoyed it. I didn't do a very good job on the beveling and burnishing because I didn't know what I was doing. I still don't. There's all these videos how to burnish an edge. But nobody says, guess what? My super secret liquid that I put on the edge so I can make a really good burnished edge, it's resin or it's wax, or I've yet to have someone say what that stuff actually is that they're putting on the edge so that when you burnish it, it makes it nice and smooth and waxed and beautiful. No one yet that I could find will tell you what that stuff is. So I've tried using water, I've tried using wax and resin, and nothing seems to really do a good job on the burnishing edge. I'm still trying to figure that out. This was the overall design of it before it was actually put into a book form. Okay, so this was one of my other projects. This was someone asked me to make them a laptop case. They wanted it to be light, functional, easy to carry, and not heavy or too much. So it really is just a wrap. You got leather straps and you just wrap over. Pretty straightforward. Now here's the problem. See these little rivets right here? I didn't buy stainless because I didn't know any better at the time. So these have all rusted out. It looks like really antique now. These buttons have started to wear off, and then these have rusted too. So when you go to buy parts for leather, it's really a good idea to focus on stainless steel at the very least, which is kind of funny because when you ask people, hey, you want me to make you a case, what would you like to see? Well, I want gold or platinum or titanium. And you can't even buy this stuff, but this is what people ask, I mean, I want, the leather to be mammoth hide, and maybe the lining made out of a dodo bird, and you're thinking, okay, these are extinct animals, and you're not going to get leather for that kind of stuff. But it's surprising what people ask you to put on something. And, oh, I want to do a wallet, but I want, 3 hidden pockets. I want a zippered area for the cash. I want the whole thing to have a zipper on the outside edge. And, like, wait a second. I offered to do you a wallet. I didn't offer you to do, Mona Lisa wallet or something. Anyway, it's kind of funny how that works out. So here's the back side of it. Basically, it's just a handle with some straps. Pretty straightforward. Okay, one of my first sheaths that I made. Very simple design. Sheaths are a really good place to start if you want to get into leather, because anybody can do a sheath. It is like the easiest thing to do. In fact, you can just take basically a square of leather, and like about yay big, about twice the size of the blade, wrap it over. Don't even bother to glue or cut or anything. Just get it really wet, wrap it over, and vacuum seal it. And this will form around the blade, and you'll have the start of a sheath. Very simple to make. And then you just have to stamp along the edge, cut it to shape. Now I did a little differently because I wanted to design along the edge, so you do have to do the design first. But what you can do is you can vacuum seal it. Then when you pull it out of the package, you open it up, you do your cut, and then you open it up, do your stamp holes, and then you do your design. And then you fold it back in and whatever. So that's a sheath, a very good place to start if you want to do something. Another sheath that I made. This is one of the first sheaths. In fact, this may be the first actual project I did. You can see this isn't waxed thread, it's just regular thread because I didn't know any better. I had these little alphabet kits that I made the letters out of. This isn't stainless. The only reason why it hasn't turned into a rust button is because it's been inside and I haven't really used it much. But I did form it by hand. I basically created a wooden block that fits around the handle, and then I pushed it down to push this part over the blade when it was closed. That's the back side. I didn't even have anything to rivet this in place. That was so new in the process. I didn't have a button snap or anything to put this together. So, okay. So I thought, I've got this water bottle made out of metal and it just leaks water everywhere. It just will not stop leaking water. I love it, but it doesn't work very well. So I thought, hey, why don't I make this cool wrap, Same problem. I did all this design on like a vegetable tanned leather, and then I put Resin on it, and it went from being like a light tan to a dark mahogany red. You can't even see the design on. Resin is an absolute pain to try and maintain the color integrity. You almost have to do oil, just mink oil or something, to keep it from changing all the color. It's very frustrating. And I ended up tossing the thermos because it's useless. Even with this sleeve, and I had a really cool insulation in it to collect the water, well, that insulation turned to mold, basically a sheet of mold. It's just like this massive sheet of mold because all the water. And, and since it was fixed to the leather, it's not like I could pull it out and wash it. You can't wash the leather. It's just a bad idea all around. You'll find that when you start out, you'll come up with these ideas that suck. I mean, they're horrible. There's a reason why they don't have videos telling you how to do it, because nobody does it with any, with any common sense. Okay, so I did this wallet. I had this idea for doing this kind of like wallet with a hard basket shape, and that you could put like credit cards into, and also has a place for a driver's license, and it has a little design, Roy Rogers, with the name and the of Roy Rogers and the name of the person. So here's the execution of it. Like I said, this is my first wallet, and that's what the face ended up looking like. I used paint, and it should have used it a little bit lighter. Actually, this was dye. That's the problem with dye. When you try to dye this color here, it always ends up too dark, it seems. You almost have to start with a white to really do it right. Oh, and this is the finished product of the outside. I had these cool star buttons, which have worn off. Now there's no gold color. It's just like a worn metal look, like a nickel look. I did this braiding, and I've only done it twice because it's so time intensive. It looks nice, but it's a lot of work to do. So here's the other back side of it, and that's it folded out. So you put the cards in here, and then you'll see here, this is a place to put your driver's license, and there's the buttons and all that. Horrible design. I mean, these things here keep folding up, and they get caught on everything. This, I use a sewing machine, and it looks horrible. I couldn't stitch a straight line to save my life there. Just absolutely bad. These have turned into rust buttons already. And all around, it doesn't look very good. And the person I made it for said, I love that you did it for me, but it's like carrying a rock in your pocket. The thing's too heavy to carry around. So it was a bad design. So hey, I'm going to make another wallet. This time I'm going to do a really sleek design where I use what someone else has suggested. I used a sort of like real thin Teflon paper or something for the credit card sections. And I'm going to use these little sticky tape stuff here that I stitched in place. Horrible idea. I'm sorry to the guy that came up with that, but that sticky tape stuff, eventually it just seeps out, and then it sticks the Tyvek whatever to the leather. So you end up with these sticky little areas you have to push your cards through. It was such a bad idea, and this kind of design anyway stinks. Pushing the cards through these just doesn't work very well. Unfortunately, a lot of the leather patterns you can buy, this is what they do. They just do these little slots, and you're expected to just push cards into them. They're not good. Don't waste your time if the pattern has this kind of design for it. Seriously. So this was going to be the outside, right? I did it in white, and I was thinking, hey, this is kind of neat. So I used carbon paper to trace the design and everything else. Problem is it created these carbon lines, couldn't get rid of. I mean, I tried everything. You can still see the carbon lines in it, and I couldn't get that carbon off, which means I couldn't use the natural color of the leather, which was white, for the design. I had to literally paint all of this instead. And I had to paint over that carbon, and it just didn't want to paint over it. It was very frustrating. The name of the person, the number of Super Bowls they won, a couple of little cool Celtic four-leaf clovers, Pittsburgh Steelers here. I forget what that is. Luck of the Irish, I think, on this side, and then the name. So that was the basic design. So here you go. This is what it looked like when I was done. I'm like, that looks pretty nice for a first time on a regular trifold wallet, right? So I did all that work. I'm talking, it's, the amount of time I've spent on this stuff is about an hour or so of work. And then I had the bright idea of dyeing the back of the piece. It literally washed out all of this. Like the luck of the Irish, the luck word, it looked like a muted yellow, like a brown more than a yellow. This white here turned to a real dark gray. The black bled through and ruined all this. I was so disgusted and annoyed, I literally just threw it away. No point. I tossed it. So I don't have an example picture of what it looked like because I was so disgusted by it with the amount of work I spent. And then, decided, what? My family member that wanted this, he doesn't need one. And I didn't bother to try and do it again. Gave up. Moving on. This was some of the practice stamping I did to get a feel for what it would look like. This is a very good thing to do. Have just scrap pieces, stamp what you're going to put on your project, and get an idea of what it's going to look like. And even, dye it, paint it, whatever in advance, so you can get a really good sense for what it's going to look like before you actually do it. You don't want to spend all that time on a project and then start painting it and say, that looks like crap. That literally looks terrible. Even if it is free to somebody, I wouldn't own it. And that's why it's good to practice stuff like that. Okay, holster. My first attempt at a holster. I'm going to vacuum seal, right? Because, I'm like, this trying to push leather down with your fingers and all that just doesn't work very well. So I got these really nice bags. I bought me a vacuum sealer at a yard sale. And I made a blank by hand. I didn't know you could buy them by hand of the 1911, which a friend of mine owned, right? Not realizing that this bag has all these like little, I don't know what you call them, some kind of a braided design on the inside. And when you vacuum seal the holster with this design on the inside, it transfers to the leather. So this whole thing had this sort of rough, perforated edge on it. And I'm thinking, oh man, I wish I'd known better. Because I did all that work, the leather and everything, just to have this be all rough on one side. Now you can buy the vacuum seal bags that don't have this stuff on them, and that's what I would suggest. So this is what it looked like. You can see all of the perforations in it. You want it very simple. You want it to be an internal sheath uh, with the name of the gun, Colt 1911. And I did all that work and everything else just to realize my blank was a little too small and he couldn't put the gun in. See, he didn't want to give me the gun to do it properly. He wanted just to give me, he wanted me to do it without him actually giving me the gun. So I didn't have the gun to work with, and I had to create the blank and all that work and effort, and the gun didn't fit into it. He was extremely upset. He was, oh yeah, hey, take care, blah blah blah. Never saw him again. It's one of those situations. You do things for people. It's a good practice for you, and you think they're going to be grateful. And if it's not perfect, they're not. Just so you know that. And they're going to ask you some insane stuff. Can you put a little GPS thing in it? Can you add, little motors to can you add, Damascus buttons made out of Damascus steel or gold or platinum? And they're asking these things like, wait a second, you can't even buy that stuff. And who in the world needs a sheath made out of the hide of a zebra? I mean, come on, guys. It's not necessary. Here's the other side. Okay, so I thought, hey, someone asked me to make them. They're going to make this cool little thing for their electric bike, and they wanted a leather seat on it. So I got this color that I thought was going to be a really nice, neat little color, and I put it on, and it looks like somebody bled all over it. I did all that work, and the person hated the color. They looked at it and said, it looks like it's bleeding. It is disgusting. So I ended up having to redo this whole thing, and I just covered it with black. Because when you get something like this, about the only thing you can do is just pour a bunch of black over it and dye the whole thing over again with black. That's the beauty of black. In fact, the first thing you're going to do if you really want to dye stuff is buy a huge, like either a gallon of black dye or one of those 32 ounces or whatever. Make sure you get a lot of black dye because you're going to need it. Because there's so many mistakes that you're going to have to fix by just dyeing it black. Okay, so I wanted to do this neat little belt, and I bought this blank, not realizing this leather wallet blank is terrible. And I'm going to do all this neat design work. I made these little stars where the holes fit in. I did all this right here, which is useless because you don't really need to punch holes in a belt if it doesn't have a lining or another piece of leather on the other side. It's pointless. But it's a design element. Okay, that's cool. I'll do that. I did all this work. I even made an ambigram so that it doesn't matter which way you wear it. This name is visible. And I'll show you. You can read the name here, Nick, right? So I'll flip it over. There you go, Nick. It's an actual ambigram in the belt because, when I wear a belt, sometimes I have to flip my belt because it wears unevenly. So you flip it around and wear it the other way to try and make it even back into shape. And that way you keep a belt looking relatively straight. But if you have something that with a name on it, you have to wear your name upside down in order to get it to even back into shape again. And I thought, well, why not do an ambigram? It's actually a really good idea. I still like the idea, and I made another belt that's just pure black with the name on it. I don't have a picture of it, though. So I did this work with a cheap leather blank that you can buy for like 20 bucks. The black lettering, again, the blood red. I don't mind the blood red. It's just the other person that did. And I did this really neat little black edge right along the edge here. Whoops. I'm doing the black edge along here and slip, and I make this big trail of black on it. Okay, it's really hard to dye just a little bit of black on an edge. Back when I was using these big round cotton ball things, You can do it all day with a Q-tip. In fact, that's what I'd suggest. Just buy a huge carton of Q-tips because Q-tips are really good. It doesn't drop too much ink. You can do a nice little design on an edge, and you have a lot more control over how much ink gets on your project. Where those cotton ball things, if you want to do any kind of fine work, forget it. It's like virtually impossible. So I had to dye this whole entire thing black. You can't even see the design now, all because I got a trail of dye that just kind of squirted on it. That's the other thing. When you're doing your dye, don't smack your bottle into the table or, throw your brush down or anything like that. Because I swear to you, Murphy's Law guarantees, it's like written into the laws of the universe, that if you throw something with dye or paint on it, it will splash back onto your project, guaranteed. Every time. And then you end up having to dye something you didn't intend to dye to hide it. But that's what black's for. I think they invented black for that reason. There you go. There's Ambigam. Here's a neat little belt. I thought, I bought this belt here from a guy I know that does a lot of leather work here. Terrible belt. Absolutely useless. There's a gap between this rod here on the inside of this, and I didn't know it. And it started to spread open right here inside. So this thing starts to rattle around all that. And this thing here, it wouldn't fit in properly. So it was terrible. Don't buy cheap belts. Buy a good belt if you're going to do it. Okay. So next thing I had this idea to do heat press. I thought, you know what? Instead of having to draw and design something, you can just take a picture and heat press it on. So I did all this research to figure out how to heat press onto leather. And I found a product made by Jojo or Joko, I forget the name of it. Let me see if I can find, I don't know what the name of it is. I really don't remember. But they have an actual material that's designed for heat pressing onto leather or wood that won't burn the leather or wood. Problem is, it's not true. I guarantee you, most of the leather that you have, veg tan, chromium, whatever it is, there's a 50-50 chance at least that if you try to heat press something on it, it will burn it. And it'll wrinkle up and look like total crap. You'll spend all this time and end up with a project that looks terrible. Because you heat press it on there and you ruin the project from it. With a few exceptions. This here is sheep hide. Actually lamb, I think. Lamb hide, I don't know why. I've never had lamb hide burn from heat press. And I was able to do this neat design that I heat pressed on there, and then I painted it very lightly with paint. And as you can see, this wasn't commercial. This was just for a friend. I didn't sell it or anything, just so you know, okay? Because I thought these were freeware images. They might not have been. It's hard to say. That's the problem with doing this stuff is you don't want to spend $100 just to use a design for something you might do once, and guess what? It doesn't look that great. So here's the other side, heat pressed on, and then I, painted around a little bit. There you go. Eyeglass case is what that was. Okay, this is actually a newer one that I've done. Someone asked me to do a sheath for a Swiss Army knife. Now, as you can see here, the difference between this and the other one, this right here is waxed thread. All of this is waxed thread. You want to use waxed thread when you're doing these things because if it gets wet and it's regular thread, it can lose some of its strength. It'll shrink or contract or expand or whatever they say, and it doesn't look very good. Or it will bleed colors or dyes into the leather, and you end up with this coloration wherever the thread is. I mean, there's a lot of things that can go wrong if you don't use waxed thread. So that was for the Swiss Army knife. This was the back side. Again, I still hadn't figured out that using a vacuum seal bag with the knobs on the inside is going to create this crappy pattern on the back. So there you go. And this is the inside. I used a lamb hide lining, which I just don't like. The one flaw with lamb hide, it does not glue well. Trying to glue it down to something, it just doesn't want to stick. I don't know why, but it hates to stick. So I have yet to buy pig skin because I don't really like the pig skin, but I may have to because I cannot get lamb hide to stick on properly. So this was also vacuum sealed around the item so that it would fit snugly in and hold in place. And this is a Swiss Army knife sheath. No design on it, just very simple. So that concludes my first YouTube video ever. I realize that's a little long-winded. My videos are probably going to be longer than most. They're not these quick, concise, a leather bag in 10 minutes type projects. But I'm hoping that by seeing the pitfalls that I experience, the difficulties I face, in whether it's in the beginning phase, the design phase, the cutting phase, stitching, finish, that you'll learn some things more than anything not to do. That in itself is extremely valuable, is knowing what not to do, so that you don't have to do it and run a project, waste a lot of time like I have on some stuff. So the next video in the series, the next video I'm planning to do, is going to be an introduction to the leather tools that I use, that I have collected over the year or two or whatever that I've been doing it. And just a quick thing, that one wallet cover, it didn't take me an hour to do. I misspoke. It actually took me like a month of careful, bearing in mind an hour or two a day, of careful painting and all that to create that design and have it all painted and dye, just to have it run to the bottom. Just want to clarify that. So yeah, check out my next video. Thank you for watching.